This is Van Vance. You're listening to the Proffitt Report podcast with Doug Proffitt.
Walk on Louisville's waterfront. Hike up to the Belvedere. Stroll down 4th Street. Cross the campus of Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Admire the memorials in Washington, D.C. And you will see the work of a Louisville treasure himself named Ed Hamilton. In my 31 years here at WHAS 11, I've covered many of Ed's unveilings. His one-of-a-kind waterfront park statue of Lincoln, York the Slave from the Lewis and Clark expedition on the Belvedere, the bronze figures down 4th that represent Louisville's civil rights struggle. And I'll never forget the scene when I showed up off East Chestnut Street one day to the historic building that is his studio. He was in there creating Abe for Waterfront Park. When I walked inside, the Civil War soundtrack from Spielberg's movie Lincoln was playing in stereo. Books filled with different Lincoln photographs were spread everywhere. The master sculptor was at work. The atmosphere, the mood, was helping Ed Hamilton create his masterpiece on this edition of the Proffitt Report podcast.
In 1841, you and I had together a tedious low-water trip on a steamboat from Louisville to St. Louis. You may remember as well as I do that from Louisville to the mouth of the Ohio, there were on board 10 or a dozen slaves shackled together with irons. That sight was a continual torment to me, and I see something like it every time I touch the Ohio or any other slave border.
The words of a young Abe Lincoln, folks, written in a letter to Joshua Speed, who was living at what is now Farmington, read by Ed Hamilton. Ed, you used those words, and you created one of the best sculptures of Abe Lincoln in this community, and it sits down at the Louisville waterfront now overlooking the new bridge. He's looking that way. You made him look that way. Why? Because of that.
Yes. Well, actually, those words were given to me through the Frankfurt Historical Society. They came up with a narrative. I created the physical portion of it.
And down there at the waterfront, there's Abe.
Yeah. What's down at the waterfront is a sitting Lincoln, 12-foot version of a sitting Lincoln on a monolith, man-made monument rock, as I like to call it, and designed by Forrest Boone, who was 5th generation removed from Daniel Boone. And this is what Forrest does. He creates these natural rock formations all over from nature.
What'd you want Lincoln doing in your sculpture?
So how it started out, they wanted me to create a Lincoln Memorial. And, you know, there are thousands of Lincoln memorials over the country. And I thought, how am I going to do this? What do I come up with? And so once I knew where it was going to go, I decided he needed not be standing on a big pedestal away from people, because Lincoln was a people person. He loved to talk. He loved to tell stories. And I noticed in my research, as he would walk along a street, people would come up to him and say, "Oh, Mr. Lincoln, how you doing? You know, blah, blah. Oh, let's have a conversation." He'd say, "Well, sit down, stranger," you know. Blah. So as I looked at the undulating land at the waterfront, I thought about this. He would be walking from Joshua Speed's office from downtown on the waterfront. Here would be these boulders of stuff at the waterfront, and he would take a notion, take his hat off, take his books out of his hands, set the books down on the right, and just sit down for a moment. Then somebody would come along, and as you notice my figure, he has his left arm extended as to say, "Hey, welcome, come on in," you know? So it's a very warm and welcoming piece. Kids love it.
They can climb on it.
They climb up on him. They sit in his lap. They sit on the hat.
And then alongside the wall, you do what's called the bas relief, which are story plaques, story plates that tell this very story.
Bas reliefs are narrative sculptures that tell a story. They're like paintings, but they're sculpture. And you're literally telling a story in 2D as opposed to being able to go around it. The 4 bar reliefs down there are 6 by 4 feet. The biggest one down there is 6 by 6, and that's the one that we just read the story from, the slave story, where he saw these slaves being loaded on these boats that go downriver to various venues, New Orleans, Cincinnati, Mississippi.
And the importance of this was, this stuck with Abe Lincoln well before the Emancipation Proclamation.
Oh, way well before.
And many believe that it was that site in Louisville that drove him again to push for this legislation.
His consciousness, for his consciousness.
Because you studied him. The thing about you is you're not just an artist, a sculptor. You're a sculptor. You are an historian. And I want to paint a picture for folks real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to take you down East Chestnut Street off Shelby to this little historic, good-looking brick building with an American flag out front, Ed Hamilton's workshop. Mm-hmm. And I walk in to do a story on this particular Lincoln that is in Louisville, and it was in a paper form, I guess, at the time. I don't know what you call it. And I walk in, and this Civil War-like music is playing, and it's Ed playing the CDs from the Lincoln movie that Steven Spielberg did. Mm-hmm. You felt you had to get into the moment about who Abe Lincoln was.
Oh, well, I do that on all my subjects, because if I don't do that, then I'm just creating a mannequin. There has to be a feeling for me to put into something. See, I'm taking an inanimate piece of material, clay, and shaping it into something, humanistic form. And if I can't put what I've studied prior to dealing with the clay, then I'm just playing in clay, you see. I'm trying to look for that personality, that spark in the eye. If I were doing you, I know your personality, and I'm looking through you. Like Bush said, I can see when he said something about Putin, I can see it through his eyes, you know? And that's where your personality is. Your personality is in your eyes, your face. Your personality is in your hands, how you talk with your hands, you see. So sculptors have to do good hands, and they have to do good eyes. They have to do good faces, and that's what that's all my whole career. If I couldn't please myself with what I do and capture the feelings that I'm looking for, then I have failed, and you're not going to feel it.
Yeah, but this is the only Lincoln that you did. Then you do this gorgeous one of him standing for Center College, which really got a lot of attention because it had just been unveiled right before the last vice presidential debate. So Lincoln's been a subject for you. Yeah. Tell me about the Center College one and how that came around. What did you go for on that one, since you had to do something completely different from the waterfront?
His friend, his name fails me right now because they went through
Was it Stewart? I looked that up. Was it Jeb Stewart?
Not Jesse? No.
Jesse?
It'll come to me. Anyway, he was a lawyer, and they did the Black Hawk Wars together. And after they finished that...
John Todd Stewart. Class of 1826.
Yes. And so what I wanted to convey, because it was going on a college campus, and what's on a campus? Books, students, learning facilities. And so I wanted him to be able to be in the front of that plaza, in front of that library, just as Stewart told him, well, Lincoln, what are you going to do now? Because you've tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you pretty much failed at everything else. Well, I'm thinking about being a blacksmith. No. Stewart turned around at his legal books, pulled the batch off, and pushed it into Lincoln's face and said, here, read these. And that's the beginning of Lincoln's search to become not only the state legislator, but ultimately the president of the United States.
Because he was born not far from Danville.
Yeah, and he loved reading. He was reading as a child. He was sucking up every book that he could run down the road, whoever had a book, and he would borrow or whatever. And then he went to the little schoolhouse down there to matriculate, And so the other bar, there, like I said, we had 4 bar reliefs down there, and the first bar relief opens the story because he's sitting in the cabin with books laid out on the floor as he's reading. Then aside on him, on the side, he's grown up a little now. He's become the rail splitter. So now we're getting him to move to Springfield, Illinois. Fast forward, now he's interacting. He's married to Mary Todd now. They're interacting with friends on the next bar relief. We go from that because he says, you can't have too many friends. If we have no friends, we have nothing. Then you move into the major catastrophe of the USA, the Civil War and the split between the states. But what we tried to show there was not only the split between the states, but the split between families, because Lincoln married into a Confederate family. Okay, Mary Todd's sister, Emily, married a Confederate general, General Helm, who was actually killed on the battlefield. So we put Lincoln and Mary Todd on one side, on the Union side of the split, and Emily and her husband, as she's caressing his dying body, on the Confederate side. And what we were trying to show there is the compassion of family. No matter what side you're on, you still have a compassion, you see.
This is what I love about you. You, when I walk into your studio, I see history books open. I see picture books. You're looking at all kinds of faces in that. Mm-hmm. You've immersed yourself so much in Lincoln. I want to know your personal view of him now. Is there anything you dislike about the man? Is there anything that shocked you, contradicted? Or is there just, I mean, your view and why he's still talked about today?
Oh, sure.
In our daily lives.
Well, I would have loved to have met him, you know. Let's say he was a man of the period, and every man of that period had their, you know, thoughts on slavery and race. If I could free everybody, I would. If I could free you, I'd send you to Liberia for you to be free. He just wasn't a down, dead heart racist, I don't think. I don't like to think that, because I think he had a conscience. Somewhere along the way, he had a conscience for people, whether you were black or whatever.
The statement you read proves that.
And the statement proves that, yeah. You know, so I would like to think that he was a man of his period, as we said, because you can't change history. Issue that we found on that plaque, when I presented that plaque design, the Confederate flag was on there. We all sat around the table at a meeting one day, and one of the members of the committee said, nope, don't want to have it. Not going to have that flag on there. And so then everybody kind of stopped and turned around and looked at me. And I thought, oh dear, what do I do now? Well, in my great wisdom,
you're the sage in the room, Ed.
in my humble wisdom, thought a minute, and I said, you know, you can't rewrite history. This is not a rewritable situation, because this existed. I'm not glorifying it, but you can't erase it. I can't take that off, because if I take that off, then who are the guys over here? Who they fight? Each other? And they sat back. Okay, now I think I get it now.
You put it in perspective, and then
you can't erase it.
You are a sculptor and an artist of statues. We are removing statues in Louisville right now.
Oh, yes.
Give me your thoughts on the taking down of the Confederate statue, Yvel, the George Prentice statue, and the Castleman statues getting ready to be removed.
Yeah. I was on the committee, the public art committee. My problem was, as an artist, an appreciation of how art is made. I understand why they were made. I totally disagree with why they were made and the time period. Let's face it, they lost the war. So why are we glorifying the losers? But I had to realize that was the South's way of saying, hey, you don't count. We don't care about you. You know, we're going to uplift our hero.
You think those statues were put up as a message to African Americans and others who were still here as times were changing?
Yes. Now, my dilemma was that when I would look at some of those statues, I thought, oh man, what beauty, the way they're made, you know, not what they meant, but the anatomy, the horses, the figures, you know. When you look at Augustus St. Gaudens's works, the Sherman piece, when he did the colored soldiers that are in Boston Commons, you know, as he's on the horse and the soldiers are marching beside him. Such a lyrical movement work. And some of these pieces are. And Castleman's a nice piece. What Castleman did in his youth, I may not condone. However, the artist who made it created a wonderful piece. Okay, so I guess I didn't want to get caught up in the body politics of having to say.
But it's political. So
it's very political. Art is political.
Where'd you come down on it?
I got off the committee.
Do you agree with their removal?
I agree. Yes, I do agree.
What you just told me, we can't erase history.
But yeah, I know that. Mm-hmm. I know that. But then we cannot have pieces that people who have been under foot for centuries, for eons, to come by and think it has nothing to do with my history, my past.
Your perspective's important. We're going to get to your life growing up on the old Walnut Street and what a great life that was and what a scene that was before it was tragically ripped out by urban renewal in a moment.
Urban removal.
Urban removal, which left giant holes that still remain in the city today. Back to our interview with Ed Hamilton in just a second. But first, I wanted to take a quick break to let you know that we dive much deeper into the Confederacy in Louisville and the recent decision to relocate the John B. Castleman statue from Cherokee Triangle. It is episode number 2 of the Proffitt Report. Check it out. You can find my interviews on that podcast with historian Brian Bush and Public Arts Commission member Chris Wrights. It's on the WHS 11 app and anywhere podcasts can be found. Now, back to Ed Hamilton. Well, Ed, let's take folks back to this remarkable childhood that you had.
Yeah.
And Walnut Street, which I like to liken today. If based on the photographs that I have documented and seen and interviewing Ed and others, Walnut Street today may have been like Bourbon Street for New Orleans. I think if Walnut Street had still been standing and it was 13 blocks from 6th and now Ali, Walnut has been renamed Muhammad Ali Boulevard. From 6th, 13 blocks over, basically, folks, ripped out in the late 1940s, 50s, and 60s for urban renewal. Yeah. And it was I think today, if it had been with us, Ed, it would have been our new Lou. It would have been the first street to make a comeback.
Right.
It was vibrant. Tell me what it was like. What did you hear and see on Walnut Street?
Oh, I grew right up in the heart of it, Doug. My dad was a tailor. He had a shop called Your Shop before he married my mom, Amy. And then when he married her, they redid the shop and they called it Your Valet Shop. And then she became a barber. And I grew up in that tailoring barber shop at 6th and Walnut Street, lived down the street in a building on the 3rd floor on 7th and Walnut Street. So every day was full of energy of people going and coming, hustle and bustle, business people, hearing the insurance, because the building where my dad's shop was in was called the Mammoth Life Insurance Company. And that building...
Which is today River City Bank.
Which is River City Bank, yeah. And it also housed the Lyric Theater. So we had the Lyric Theater, the Walnut Street liquor store on the corner where River City Bank is now, and my dad's shop, and then on down the street, pawn shops, restaurants, record stores,
jazz clubs,
you name it. Up and down both sides. Grand Theater was across the street from the Lyric Theater.
Was it a predominantly African-American spot then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question. Yeah, that was it. I mean, where else could they go?
Did those families own the businesses, or were they white landlords?
No, a lot of them did not own the businesses. They were white landlords. Now, the Mammoth Life Insurance Company was black-owned.
Right, one of the few in the country in the South at the time.
And the domestic life was across the street on the corner of 6th and Walnut Street.
Remember, I took you into
yes, that's right.
Mammoth Life. Remember, behind that weird facade of River City Bank is the original Mammoth Life building. Look through the slats, folks. Yeah. You'll see the brick. And the stone, the beautiful marble and stone. That is the only remaining building original to Walnut Street left standing.
Yes.
And so you were safe. You rolled out of the door. You could run anywhere. What was it like say on a Friday afternoon, getting ready to go into the weekend?
You could hear people getting ready for the weekend. The shows were open. People were downtown. Cars coming back and forth. And I'm out there just running around, enjoying myself, escaping from my mom, who kept her eagle eye on every place that I put my little body, And then what was so interesting was, as the weekend approached, it was like it was kind of winding down, see. From Monday, hustle and bustle, people going to work, making that paycheck, see. Wednesday, what they call now hump day. Then Thursday, Friday. Then everything is kind of slowing up a little. I could tell that slow motion a little bit. Then Saturday, it really slowed down because some things were just some people were closed up or whatever. Then Sunday, nothing. You could literally lay in the middle of the street at times and nobody would come to. And I would sit on the stoop down at 7th and on the corner on the stoop of the building we lived in, and or look out and sit in the third floor window looking down on Walnut Street, quiet as a mouse, because people were at church, people taking it easy at home. Sometimes there would be the Eastern Star Women's Parade coming down Walnut Street. See, had all these. Sometimes you get these parades and things coming. Oh, it was just fascinating. And these women in all these white uniforms marching.
The mayor of Louisville at the time of urban renewal, Charles Farnsley, later said, and it's on film recorded. It was on a KET special that it was the biggest mistake that happened to the city, and that he had wished it. That had not happened, because we found old film and photos of the bulldozers just came in. Imagine that today. Came into blocks of city streets and just ripped everything out
with no preservation aspect at all. Like now.
But then the overall racist tone to it too. Yeah. Let's just clear the blacks out of here.
They're getting too close to downtown. Well, you already were too close to downtown. You're only 2 blocks from the major white artery, 4th Street. And that's where all the white businesses were, all the theaters that we couldn't go to, all the stores that you could buy but you couldn't try on, you see. So you had that situation going on.
And I interviewed your wonderful wife, Bernadette, for that report we did on this. And she said something that I've never forgotten. She said, just think of the generations of businesses that could have survived or stayed there. Families on Walnut Street, sons and daughters. Instead, those folks and residents, too, fled to the East End and got out of the West End because they had nothing there. The business district was gone.
Nothing there. So only buildings down, and now they're tearing down Beecher Terrace. And this is good. Got to get rid of that old stuff. Bring in the old. Take out the old. Bring in the new.
It dated in 1940.
Sure. Yeah. But see, Beecher Terrace was built for temporary housing for service people.
You could tell by the look of it.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I mean, of course, it was block building.
It looks like a barracks.
It looked like barracks, but nobody was supposed to live there forever. You're supposed to come in and stay there, get your step up, and move on to a better housing situation.
But you and others I've talked to in the past have proven to me that Louisville, despite not being a perfect city like most in America and in the South, was an early trailblazer in civil rights and the treatment of African Americans. We were doing things well before the civil rights protests in the 60s.
That's right.
Things were changing.
That's right. And I remember riding a bus. I never had a problem on the buses. City buses. Love the city buses. Get on that bus, put my money in there, and ride all the way down to the river and back. Come all the way back around. So Louisville was somewhat progressive in that people think of it somewhat as kind of a southern city, but it's a little northern city as well. Of course, when Derby time comes, everybody thinks it's a southern city. Well, they like that antebellum style.
Boxing gyms were integrated.
Oh yeah,
Farnsley himself helped integrate the public libraries and the University of Louisville way before any of the late 60s, the MLK marches of the late 60s.
Let's just face it, it wasn't Mississippi. Thank God for that, man.
So you go to Shawnee High School.
So I go to Shawnee High School.
And then you roll out, you got into some classes through your university classes that interested you in art, and you somehow connect with one of Louisville's great characters, no longer with us, Barney Bright. What a great name. Tell me how Barney Bright comes into your life, and he influenced your work today.
Yes. Barney Bright was born and raised in Shelbyville, Kentucky. Went to the Army, did some other works to survive. Got to Louisville, opened up his sculpting studio. When I was in art school, Fred Merida of Fred Merida Art Gallery that had a small gallery in the Brown Hotel.
Was this the 60s?
60s. Yeah,
So
it's 60s.
Did Barney Bright like to imbibe in a little marijuana and stuff like that?
Didn't see it.
Didn't see it.
Smoked like a fish. Yeah. But what happened was I started noticing when I was in art school, when I would visit Fred Merida's art gallery and see these wonderful these sculptures, figurative sculptures. And I often wondered who did it. Then the Norton of Wave TV, the Nortons, commissioned Barney to do the winged Icarus in the Wave Garden when they created that Wave Garden at the corner of Floyd.
It's still there?
No, it's not still there.
That sculpture's not there anymore?
No.
At Floyd and Broadway?
It's been taken to Floyd County. I think it's over in Floyd County now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
What happened? It somehow gotten damaged.
Oh, it was a beautiful sculpture.
Took it down, and it stayed down for a while. And my dear friend over at the Floyd County Arts and Culture over there, they got hold of it, I think, and it's now been redone.
Why was Barney so brilliant?
Because he was good. Good in that he could execute wonderful portraits of people, figurative.
Were they whimsical?
Some whimsical, but he could really do some very good, tight, good detail imagery of, portraitures. If we did a portraiture review, it'll look like you.
Are Barney Bright sculptures worth a lot of money today if you can find them?
They could be worth more if Barney had really achieved a national reputation. You see, I didn't become who I am today because of just doing work in Louisville. I had to get my work out of here for even Louisville to accept me, you see. Then once somebody outside of your arena said, oh, he's good, we like that, and he's got a piece over there, all of a sudden you start achieving
you get love back home.
Yeah, you get much love back home.
Well, it's nice to get the national attention, and
it is, but what I'm saying is, as I met Barney, let me tell you how I met Barney, because this is a good story here, baby. This is a good story. You're going to like this story. I was teaching ceramics and sculpture at Iroquois High School. So where we would buy clay was next door to Barney's studio on Frankfort Avenue, 2031 Frankfort Avenue, see?
Sort of down near the river.
No.
Not that part?
Upper Frankfort Avenue. We're going toward the railroad, that School for the Blind area.
Oh, okay.
That part of Frankfort Avenue. Well, this one particular day, I probably think it was like in April, I probably think it was late March, April, something like that. I stopped in King's Ceramic Shop to buy clay for school. So I'm looking over at this wall that separates the ceramic shop and Barney's studio. And I said, oh, that's Barney's studio right there. Maybe I should go over there and knock on the door. Well, Daniel King, elderly, wonderful person, loved to talk art and worldly stuff. We got to talking. So finally, I said, Daniel, I got to go. I got to get this clay. So I was parked out in front of Barney's studio, front door right there. I loaded up the car. Now, it's 1970. I got an afro out to here. Oh, I had a pretty afro, man. Oh,
I've seen the pictures.
Oh, man. I had an afro that if I leaned over, I would lean. You know what I'm saying? Oh, man, I had it, baby. Look. So I got in the car, and I did another quick scope of looking over at Barney's door, and I said, why don't you get, but something, I could not get myself to open my door and go knock on that door. And so for some reason, I started to turn the key, and I was getting ready to go. As I was getting ready to turn the ignition key, start the car, oh my God, Barney walked out the front door to check his mailbox. Was right there on the side of the door. It was at that moment, I don't know what transpired. I'm having a moment here.
Sorry. You're getting emotional. It is a big moment in your history. He was such a character.
Oh, he was. Yeah. So I got out of the car, and I very carefully walked over to him. I said, Mr. Bright, I'm Ed Hamilton. I love your work. I've seen your works, and I'm trying to recall what I really said. And I'm thinking I must have asked to come in or something. But I do remember this. I remember it exactly as my mother breathes, and he said, sure, come on in. Whew, man, when I crossed that threshold, life changed.
That moment.
Life changed. Couldn't wait to get home.
He embraced you.
We talked. He said, where'd you go to school? I said, Art Center School out at University of Louisville on campus out there. He said, I taught out there, and I used to see stuff that students would put on this block outside the art school. And he said, I saw a piece out there. It was kind of rough, but I always wanted to tell the student, hey, you got potential. And I said, well, was it the plaster, rough plaster that was a rendition of one of Rodin's atom piece off of his Gates of Hell? He said, yeah, that was it. I said, that was mine.
Oh, the connection. You guys were thick as thieves. How long did you work with him?
Oh, I worked with him from 73, actually. Started late 72, 73, all the way up until we finished the clock in 76.
Aha, the Louisville clock. We got to bring that up.
Yeah,
That's the most famous Barney Bright.
Yes.
Most people today hearing this may be familiar with the modern version that was put in, but now it has been removed. But in the 70s, Barney Bright, and there's Ed Hamilton in his studio, create this thing called the Louisville clock.
Yeah.
What was it? Tell me about the idea behind it and how you guys put this thing together. Because it never worked right.
No, well, but okay, let me clarify. It wasn't, I had nothing to do with the creation of it, period. Barney was commissioned by, what's his name?
Harvey Sloan?
No.
The mayor?
No. Oh, shoot. See, I'm getting too old to try to backtrack. It'll come to me. Anyway, in the video that they made of it, he said, this is the damnedest thing I ever seen. But they wanted Barney to create a signature piece that people would come for miles around for all over the world.
Because they were going to put it on what was called then the River City Mall, which is now 4th Street Line.
Yeah.
That's where the clock was going to sit out, open air in the weather in the public.
Open air.
And so what was on the clock?
Open air. Okay. Yeah, George Rod, what it was a big, if you notice, it looked like a big donut ring, 20 feet in diameter or whatever. And then there were 5 figures that would race around the clock every given hour. And it kind of represented Churchill Downs. Ali was on there. D.W. Griffith was in the upper portion of it. Marion Anderson.
The Belle of Louisville.
And the Belle of Louisville. Daniel Boone. And George Rogers Clark. Now, so George Rogers Clark, the Belle of Louisville, let me see, which one other one? Daniel Boone. I already said Daniel Boone.
D.W. Griffith.
No, Griffin wasn't on the race part. There were 2 more. But anyway, at 12 o'clock each day, the announcer would come on. Now, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, and it would be a paddock parade. And they would... And
it was a little recording announcer.
Yeah, the recording announcer, yeah. And they parade around the ring. And then they'd go around the ring one time. Then they'd come back kind of like under the paddock area. And then he'd say, and they're off. And then they'll start racing, man. And he'd give you the description. Daniel Boone is leading. And here comes George Rogers Clark. Oh, here comes the Belle of Louisville. She's coming in real strong. Oh, wait a minute. Here comes the Belle. Oh, here comes so-and-so. George Rogers. Daniel. No. And it's the winner is,
And then it would chime the hour.
And then it would chime the hour and everything. Yeah, it was fun because it was like Barney created that piece as an old toy.
It was so fun to watch. I was a kid.
It was a blown up toy.
So what was it made with? Because it just had a hard time operating.
Well, the problem was we were a little before time, technology wise, computer wise. It was chain driven, and chain driven stuff don't like coal and snow and ice, and that was the situation.
And what were the figures made of?
Figures made of aluminum.
Oh, okay.
But and I took the actual, I cast all the figures in wax and then was charged by Barney to take them to the foundry in Pontiac, Michigan. And we drove them up there to Pontiac, Michigan, had them cast in bronze, and then we got them back and then put them all together and stuff like that. So,
and how many years do you think the clock lasted before it had to be taken down? It just sort of fell apart.
Well, it stayed on the River City Mall for maybe 3 or 4 years, I guess, at best. And then they took it down and then recreated that, opened that back up, and they took it to the. Didn't they take it to the zoo?
Yes, they went to the zoo, and it sort of had different homes.
Yeah, it had different homes, and then ultimately they just got tired of maintenance on it.
And then Adam Burkle of the Homemade Pie Kitchen tried to redo the clock.
Well, he did. He actually did.
He actually did. A new modern version,
right.
Well built,
more
weather resistant,
computer technology. But it didn't have the tinky.
No. And it had issues itself.
But it had issues, too. So
it is stored now.
It's back in storage again.
Do you know whatever happened to the original Louisville clock? The one you all built. The one that Barney Bright built. Because
what he found was all the parts of the original.
But his was much bigger.
No. That was the original clock.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. All he did was put it back together. Because the city, when they took it down, they cut it in half.
Oh my gosh!
It bent up everything.
I thought he had done a whole replication of it. Wow, that's even a better story.
He took and renovated the original piece itself.
Well, Ed, before we leave, I do want to talk about one more sculpture that you did that everybody can see that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's so easy to find if you want to walk up to the Belvedere and look over the Ohio River. There's York.
Oh, York, yeah.
There's York standing there. And York is an amazing figure because he was William Clark's slave, and he was vital to the Lewis and Clark, part of the bicentennial celebration for the Lewis and Clark expedition and the Corps of Discovery.
That's right.
You made it. And, of course, George Rogers Clark founded Louisville. William Clark was his brother. And most people will argue that the Lewis and Clark expedition to discover the West started really in Clarksville, Indiana, and Louisville.
Started in Louisville, right down on the waterfront. They met, left from there, embarked on up to the north.
Was York from here?
No. York was born in Virginia with Clark.
And
they grew up together.
They loved him. He was called a slave, but he was a crucial part of the expedition.
Yeah, because they needed each other, man. You know, when you're out with a group of people in nowhere land, you got to rely on each other. You know, I got your back. You got my back. They voted for the first time. I would imagine that York and Sacagawea and Sarah, I can't think of her husband's name. He was the Frenchman, and all the other 13 participants all voted on which way. There was a split one way and said, do we take this road? So they decided, well, let's take a vote. And so everybody got a vote. York got a vote. She got a vote. And all the other guys got a vote. And so I'm saying, this is probably the first time a black dude voted.
It might be in history.
To
discover the West.
No question. So they wanted to honor York. Now, how I got that, Jim Holmberg of the Filson
Historical Society,
wanted, he was the one that when they discovered the journals, the journals of the Clark expedition, Lewis and Clark expedition, was stuck away someplace in a trunk. Not here, but someplace outside of here. And someone found them, and Jim got hold of them, and he's the one that started deciphering them, and literally discovered the role York played. Had we not found those journals, there'd be no history to tell you that York had a thing to do with the Lewis and Clark expedition.
The role York played in Louisville when he was here.
Yeah. Well, he didn't play as big a role as he possibly wanted to because, unfortunately, 3 years this man was free. Lived the life like everybody else while they were together. Come back home, successful, a journey. Clark puts him right back into a slave situation. Then gets mad at him and says how all York wanted was his freedom and to be with his wife, Rose. And he said, well, how dare you be insolent? Now, he done saved your life several times on this expedition. The Indians, the reason why they put York out front, because they'd never seen a black man in some of those Native American areas. And so they pushed York out front. And so when he would go in, the Indians were fascinated. And so one of the Indian chiefs came up to him and spit on his arm and tried to rub the blackness off.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, what happened was this group, when they would go on a successful hunt, they would come back as a success and paint their bodies with coke all over it. And so he thought it was a white man under this blackness. And so he said, Big Medicine. So they coined him Big Medicine.
Wow.
And they wanted some of that Big Medicine. And so that's how York became so endured to the Native Americans.
And your statue shows this giant of a man looking toward the falls of the Ohio.
Yeah, from whence they went and came back from.
And every holiday season, somebody puts a wreath on York.
Sure does.
Well, Ed, this has been fantastic, and I can't leave without asking you a question I'm sure everybody asks you. What's your favorite sculpture? What's your favorite piece of art that you have created?
Oh, that I've created?
Yes. It's like telling you to pick a favorite child. I know.
I will say York. I'm going to give you 3 or 4. I'm going to give you York. I'm going to give you Spirit of Freedom. I'm going to give you the Amistad.
Spirit of Freedom's in Washington.
Spirit of Freedom's in D.C. Amistad's in New Haven, Connecticut. Lincoln's in Kentucky, and York is in Kentucky. I think though, how would you place them in regard to the importance and what impact that they made? I'm thinking the Civil War piece had the most impact worldwide on people for some reason.
Have you been to the African American Museum in Washington?
Not yet. I've tried to make contact, but they just, that's another story.
It's tough to get in.
It's a tough job to break it down. I'll get there at some point.
Well, what I love,
but anyway,
you and your wife Bernadette. How old are you now?
I'll be 72 in February.
72. You guys. When I see you all, you're like 50-year-olds.
Thank you.
You enjoy going out to dinner and experimenting Louisville's great restaurants.
That's right.
You go everywhere from rooftop bars to the neat places. I see you all around. You're always laughing, and you two are just a fantastic couple. How long have you been married?
52 years this year.
Wow.
Yeah. We celebrated our 50th anniversary in Spain a year or so ago.
Oh, my gosh. Well, like I do for every one of my guests, I send them I give them the last word. I send them a group of questions before I let them out of here because I want them to think about it. And so, Ed, I'm going to start with my first question to you. Your favorite historic building in Louisville?
I got 2. Am I allowed
That's
to have
fine.
2?
Yes, you are.
I want to say the revised old trolley barn buildings known as the African American Heritage Center down at 18th Street. Those buildings, as I was growing up, played a vital role in the history of Louisville, because of the trolleys. And ultimately, the buses started, That's one. The other one is the old armory at 6th and
Louisville Gardens.
Louisville Gardens, yeah. Because the armory played such a big role in sports, events. For me, going over there, my dad and mom taking me to these events, the roller derby, the wrestling.
It's just down the street from you on Walnut Street.
Walk
there. You go.
Right up the corner. See, so those are 2 of the buildings that I have a fond memory of. Really.
Number 2, the architecture style you most admire in a Louisville neighborhood.
The architecture style I most admire is the architecture out of St. James Court and the old 3rd Street corridor.
Old Louisville.
I'm a traditionalist. I like bricks and mortar and columns, and I'm just not into that modern type thing. I like the old, substantial, traditional style.
I knew you would. A lot of people pick Old Louisville, and it just endures. Yeah. Your favorite Louisville street or intersection, one that strikes your eye or curiosity when you see it and just go, wow.
Now, come on, Doug. You know what that's going to be. Every time I come down Muhammad Ali, I can't help but feel the vibe. No sooner I hit 6th Street, all of a sudden, whoosh.
Yeah. When you're going west.
6, 7,
down, 8. Does the collection of those buildings
they just pop right back into my head.
Your favorite statue or public art in Louisville other than your own?
I got 3.
Okay.
As I was matriculating through art school and visiting Speed Museum, out front of that museum was the Prodigal Son, the over life-size piece made by George Gray Bernard. And it represents the prodigal son as the father's caressing the son as he's leaning down, caressing the son. So I just love that piece. Then growing up and going to the library at 4th Street, that was my first encounter of Abraham Lincoln as a child.
Because he's still there, sort of hidden under the magnolia trees.
Yeah. On that little rock down there, see?
But it's a gorgeous statue.
And I would stand there and look and think, gee, this man is big, So that's the other one. And then the other one was Yandell Daniel Boone that stands out in front of Cherokee Park. Daniel Boone with the rifle. He's holding.
Oh, yes, in front of Cherokee Park. And right about what entrance, again, for people if they want to see that?
Off the Eastern Boulevard area.
Yeah, Eastern Parkway.
Eastern Parkway area, yeah. And see, she did that piece not specifically for Louisville. She did that piece for the 1800 exposition.
The one that was held at for Chicago, or was it the one held here?
No, not
okay.
Here in Chicago.
Wow.
Her and a group of other women artists had an impact on that creating things around that. And she did that, and someone purchased it and said, well, let's put it here in Louisville.
And we wrap it up with my question to you. The future of Louisville is?
Well, my hope for our city is that we work together to overcome our differences and realize that we have more in common than we know.
So well said. Ed, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how can they reach you? What's the best way to do it?
EdHamiltonStudios.com.
And it's a great website. And if you need to reach me, any feedback, my email address is dproffitt, that's DPROFFITT at WHAS11.com. Ed, you're a community treasure. You ought to have a statue of yourself. I don't know who would make it.
I don't know who would do it.
But we need an
Maybe I should do it myself.
We'll put it at the entrance to the old Walnut Street.
There you go. Thank you, Doug.
I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Proffitt Report podcast. And this has been a production of WHAS 11 Media.